joint hosting of a very exciting panel this afternoon. Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whichever time zone you are. My name is P.S. Sriraj. I am the director of the Urban Transportation Center at UIC and also research professor in urban planning. We are very happy to support Transport Chicago, which is celebrating its 40th year. And this is a very exciting panel, as I said at the outset. I will, to moderate today's session and introduce the panelists, I will invite Quinn Casal, who's the Vice President of Transport Chicago for this year. And of course, as is always the case, we toot our own horn whenever we can. We have strong UIC, UTC connections with the panelists and also with Quinn. Quinn, over to you.
All right,
And
thank you.
one just housekeeping issue, if I may. Just if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box. And I would request everyone to have their microphones muted, please. Quinn, over to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sriraj. Again, my name is Quinn Casal with Transport Chicago. I'm the Vice President of Transport Chicago. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you're new to Transport Chicago, we are a one-day conference dedicated to transportation, primarily in the Chicago region. That conference will be happening next Friday, a week from today, at the Voco Hotel near the Merchandise Mart. Registration is still available if you're interested. We'll be covering freight rail, passenger rail, public transit, bike ped, walkability, urban design, all kinds of every format of transportation you can think of for the most part. This webinar is one of several events that we've sort of coordinated with our partners here, like the Urban Transportation Center at UIC, to sort of build some of the energy and excitement towards the conference and also help us reach some different audiences and different speakers. So we're very thrilled to have our panelists here today. We're here today to talk about freight rail. As many of you know, Chicago is recognized as the capital of the North American rail network. Chicago's role in freight rail plays a really critical role to the nation's economy that is sometimes overlooked. All six Class 1 railroads converge right here in Chicago. So really to appreciate transportation in Chicago is to appreciate many things, but is absolutely to appreciate the importance of freight rail to the region and to the country. Today, we're going to hear from three of those six Class 1 railroads. We have Peter Scozzi, Executive Director of State Government Affairs at BNSF, Tom Evanson, Senior Director of Public Affairs for Illinois and Wisconsin at Union Pacific, and Kevin Donahue, State and Local Affairs Manager with Canadian National. Without further ado, I will turn it over to our first speaker, Mr. Peter Scozzi with BNSF.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here as a former attendee of Transport Chicago back when I was in my Metropolitan Planning Council days. It's great to see that this organization and this conference still thriving, and still happy to be a part of it. So today I'm going to just talk about the freight railroads in general and a little bit about our role of with the environment, what we're doing to become more environmentally sustainable, and actually some of the stuff that we've already been doing. Next slide. I'm going to just break my presentation into two parts. I'll do an industry overview for the National Rail Network and then delve in a little bit into BNSF in particular. Next. The freight rail network, I think as Quinn pointed out, you can see by this map, all these lines kind of converge on Chicago. It's the darkest section of the map. The important point really to take away from here is that the freight rail network literally covers the entire country. You'll hear from CN as well that goes up into Canada, and all of us have some connections into Mexico as well. So the entire North American continent is served by the six Class 1 railroads that do all converge here in Illinois. Next. It is the backbone of the, we say that with not much humility because it's really quite true. Everything that's this enormous impact on the economy, from the economic output to the number of jobs to the wages. And again, here in Illinois, we have such a very large concentration of rail with not only the tracks, but also the numerous yards that are around the Chicago area rail, it plays a very important part in the Chicagoland economy. Next. There are numerous types of railroads. I think it's important to understand this. You're going to hear from three of us today. We all sort of fall under that Class 1 category, the large freight rail network, freight railroads that traverse the country. But railroads come in many shapes and sizes. There are railroads that are switching and terminal railroads that could be as small as a single engine and a mile of track. It could be a grain elevator that grabs the grain from the elevator, brings it over to a main line, and then hooks it up to a class one. That's a railroad. So the shapes and sizes of railroads come in many forms. My comments today are really focused on class one railroads. The class two and three and the switching and terminals do operate a little differently and have some differences. So don't generalize, don't take my comments in general over the entire industry, if you will. Next. I always like to say, we used to always say, well, everything moves by rail. And we start to list all the things that move by rail. I was giving a talk yesterday and I asked folks in the audience, I said, try and name one thing that doesn't move by rail. And it's actually quite hard. Just about everything that you can think of moves by rail in one shape or form within its life cycle. One of the people said, buildings don't move by rail. I said, well, actually, they kind of do. Every component piece of a building comes by train at one point or another, whether that's the rock that forms the concrete or the steel that forms the girders or the shingles and the roofing and the Tyvek and the lumber for a house. So pretty much everything that touches our daily lives at one point or another in its evolution is moved by rail. Next. Also important to note is that freight rail is, again, class ones. We are private infrastructure. We build and maintain and pay for our own infrastructure with our own dollars. As we just wound up our last General Assembly and our session this last weekend. Freight rail, class one railroads, we're not there with our hands out asking for money to build rail or build bridges. Over since 1980, and 1980 is an important point because there was a large bill passed in Congress that really altered the progression of the freight rail industry. So that's often used as a benchmark. It's called the Staggers Act, if you care to look it up. But $810 billion have been spent since 1980 on the nation's freight infrastructure. And again, that's private sector dollars being invested to have an enormous impact on the public. Next. The other interesting fact, I've been with the railroads now 8 years. And when I started, I really didn't quite appreciate the level of technology that goes into rail and rail transport. We have been using AI and predictive analytics and machine learning for quite some time to track cars, to track the tracks themselves, to look for any irregularities or anomalies that might cause a derailment and go out and fix those as soon as possible. I've got another slide on technology, so I'm going to leave some more comments for that later. Next. The point about environment and rail. So just inherently, rail is a very environmentally efficient way to move goods. We're 3 to 4 times more fuel efficient than a truck. We move 1 ton of freight nearly 500 miles on a single gallon of fuel. So I like to kind of just put that in perspective. If you were a Ford Taurus, which is about a 2-ton vehicle, that's similar to a Ford Taurus getting 250 miles per gallon. So I think if any automotive manufacturer was able to make a full-size sedan that was getting 250 miles to the gallon, we'd all celebrate that tremendously. And that's what freight rail does each and every day. Most of that is due to the fact that we're running steel wheel on steel rails. There's very little friction, and we get up moving, and there's inertia, and we just kind of keep rolling. But nonetheless, it's an extremely environmentally and fuel efficient way to move goods. Next. I'm going to shift a little bit and talk about BNSF. A lot of my comments, though, have applicability across all the class ones. I just put this map up there so you can see our network. BNSF operates on the western half of the United States. Union Pacific also operates in this territory. On the eastern half of the United States, you'll have Norfolk Southern and CSX. And then kind of coming down the Mississippi River Valley and going up into Canada, you'll see CN and CPKC. We connect all the ports and all the intermodal facilities in the country. Next. So here's that technology slide I mentioned earlier. And this is, again, BNSF specific, but certainly has applicability across all the class ones. If you look at that third bullet point, third circle there, BNSF collects over 30 million pieces of computer data a day. And that's all read and analyzed by our computers in Fort Worth so that we can see at track speed, as train's moving at track speed, whether or not a faceplate in the rail has a crack in it, whether or not a wheel has a crack in it, whether a spike on a tie is missing, and then we can send crews out to go take care of that. Now, again, of those 30 million pictures, 30 for whatever the vast majority of them, there's no issues with them. But the computer now has gotten to such a point, we've trained it to such a point that can identify almost hairline fractures in a steel wheel. And when that car comes into the yard the next time, we can swap that wheel set off and prevent a derailment. The first bullet on the side there talks about positive train control, PTC. Next slide. PTC is essentially a system that allows us to see where all the trains are on the network at any time. And should for any reason something be wrong or awry, there's a stalled train ahead, or there's a switch flipped in the wrong direction, we can stop that train remotely. We can put the brakes on that train from Fort Worth. Positive train control took years for the industry to develop. It is available on every locomotive, and it's interoperable across our rail networks. So if one of BNSF's locomotives goes on to Canadian National Railroads, the PTC is all still compatible. So this is truly an enormous step towards automating rail in North America. And all for safety and really for the efficiency of moving goods. Next. On the capital investment side, I mentioned before the aggregate that rail industry spends. Well, BNSF itself will spend about $4 billion this year on capital expenses. Important to point out that last bullet there, 75% of those dollars, though, are going to go towards maintenance. They're going to go back towards fixing the track and the bridges and the rail that we already have. So that's, when I was back at MPC, we did a funny video about nobody ever celebrates capital investments on maintenance because it's not sexy, it's not glamorous. There's not really a good ribbon cutting. You're just putting the track back where it once was. But rail does that each and every year because we have to keep our system running, keep the trains on the track and the goods moving on time. Next. Renewable fuels. Actually, skip this one. This is about us transporting renewable fuels. What we're doing, again, every class one has a goal. This is BNSF's goal. Our goal is to reduce emissions 30% by 2030 with a 2016 baseline. And we're doing that through a whole host of ways. We are purchasing better locomotives. We're testing new technologies. We're doing battery electric. The one thing, though, that we really have to do in order to reach that commitment is to figure out the propulsion systems for our locomotives. People say, well, go to battery electric, go to hydrogen, do all these less CO2, less greenhouse gas emitting options. Well, we've tried those and we continue to try those. BNSF spent about $30 million on an battery electric locomotive prototype. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but the batteries as they exist today can hold about 250 megawatts of power, and we need essentially 2,000 megawatts of power in that locomotive. So the battery and batteries are improving every day, and they're probably yesterday there was probably a new one that came out that does even better. But until we can shrink those and have that contain the capacity that we need, battery electric just isn't a good solution for us. It will come though. It will come at some point. Next slide. In the meantime, we're really trying to work on improving the locomotives we have by moving up to tier 4 locomotives. You can switch the side, Ed. Um, Moving up to the tier 4 locomotives, those are the cleanest locomotives that are available today. So we, as our older fleet goes, as we're cycling through our older fleet, we're upgrading with these new tier 4 ones. And we're also looking at purchasing renewable diesel fuel. Renewable diesel is a different fuel than it is widely available today, but it's actually not available in Illinois for longer reasons than I have to explain. But renewable diesel has about a 60% carbon efficiency rating compared to regular diesel. Also importantly, it has a 35% and 15% reductions in NOx and particulate matter. So it'll be good for the environment and it'll be good for the lungs, the air in the lungs that we breathe. So as we're trying to find access to and create an availability for renewable diesel in Illinois right now. Next. We are also working on different yard technologies. So here you see a picture that has electric hostlers. These are the trucks that are inside our yards that move the containers around. Battery electric hostlers, forklifts, all those little drayage trucks. Those are also ways that we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions at the yard site. We do have battery electric hostlers working in some of our warmer climates, but we tested them in cold climates, actually over in Minneapolis, and still the technology isn't quite there where we can charge those quick enough and the batteries last long enough in the dead of winter. So we get about a 20% reduction in utilization with the battery electric hostlers than we do with the current diesel, which means we would have to have about 20% more of those trucks. And when we have about 100 of those, 200 of those in a yard, that's a significant amount of trucks that we'd have to buy, additional trucks we'd have to buy. So that technology is also improving. Finally, we do recycle a lot. So everything that we use and we use up, we recycle. So that's railroad ties, whether that's oil, batteries that are in our locomotives, all of that gets recycled every year. So, yep, that's the end of my slides. I think I'm turning it over to Tom.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yep, we will head over to Tom with Union Pacific.
Hello, everyone. Again, Tom Evenson, Senior Director of Public Affairs for UP for the states of Illinois and Wisconsin. In my presentation, I'll give you a brief overview of Union Pacific, as well as Chicago's CREATE program, really the first of its kind public-private partnership to modernize the rail system here in the Chicago region. So we'll get right into it. Next slide, please. Just start off with a cultural point here at Union Pacific. Really, since our CEO, Jim Vena, took over in 2023, our credo has been safety, service, and operational excellence. So we want to be the best at safety. We want everybody to go home to their families safely every day. We want our customers to be safe and the communities where we operate to be safe. So everything starts and ends with that. Next is service. That's simply delivering the service we sold to our customers. Oh, sorry, just a few more. And we do that through operational excellence, which is being wise with the money we have, driving decision-making at those closest to doing the work and engaging our people. So next slide. This is the network. Union Pacific is the largest Class 1 railroad in North America. We have over 32,000 route miles in the western two-thirds of the United States, about 32,000 employees, and we're the only Class 1 that has access at all 6 U.S.-Mexico ports of entry, from Calexico to Brownsville. And I would also add that you can see from the different icons on the screen the various products that we move. Peter touched on some of that as well, so we can skip to the next slide, please. Our business is really divided into thirds, a third of that being bulk, so ingredients for food and beverage products, grain and grain products, coal, renewables, biofuels. The next third being premium, so the intermodal service that Peter talked about as well. That's consumer goods coming on cargo ships from Asia into our West Coast ports, Finnish automotives from Mexico and so forth, and other places in the United States. And then the final third being our industrial segment, which is going to be plastic pellets, chemicals like chemicals that treat our water supply, construction materials, forest products, lumber to build homes, all those things, and energy products. Next slide. So really, again, really fast. Peter touched on this as well, but this year Union Pacific will spend about $3.5 billion upgrading our infrastructure. We've got, as I mentioned, 32,000 route miles and almost 17,000 bridges across our network. So $2 billion of that will go to replacing track and tie and maintaining those things. And the rest is divided up between our facilities, locomotives, and the technology that we use to run the railroad safely and efficiently. Next slide, please. Just drilling down, this is Union Pacific in Illinois, so we're the largest Class 1 railroad in the state. We have almost 2,400 miles of track in Illinois, about 2,200 at-grade highway crossings, 3,000 employees. Over the last 10 years or so, we've invested about $1.5 billion into our railroad here in the state, again, on infrastructure improvements. And then over the last 5 years, we've spent about $4 million through our local grants program and other activities, donating monies to local charities here in Illinois and supporting the communities where we run through. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to switch over to the CREATE program, Chicago Region Environmental and Transportation Efficiency Program. That's a mouthful, but really this is a first of its kind partnership that was created about 25 years ago to modernize Chicago's rail network and to create more efficiency, capacity, and safety. So we'll next slide, we'll get into it. Just to set the table, Quinn mentioned this earlier, but Chicago really is the backbone of the U.S. supply chain. 50% of all the intermodal containers in the country either terminate in Chicago or run through Chicago, transferring from east to west or west to east. And then 25% of all U.S. rail traffic comes through Chicago. So it's imperative that for the nation's supply chain, not only just for the region, but the nation's supply chain, that the terminal runs smoothly. Next slide, please. This was touched on as well by Peter, but virtually everything you can think of runs through the city or the region. Next slide, please. These are the partnership. So on the public side, you've got IDOT, the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways, and then Chicago Department of Transportation, the U.S. Department of Transportation, of course, including the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Railroad Administration, all 6 Class 1 railroads, the 2 belt railroads here in Chicago, the BRC, the Belt Railway Company, and then the IHB, the Indiana Harbor Belt, and then the 2 passenger rail carriers, Amtrak and Metra. And so when you think about this partnership and what these folks are what we're trying to achieve is, about 25 years ago, there was a storm in Chicago and a series of winter storms sorry, some people are having trouble seeing the slides, maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, there was a series of storms that led to congestion in the rail network and major bottlenecks. And that not only affected the Chicago region, but also the U.S. supply chain, and it caused months of delay. And so everyone sort of came together with the federal government and said, how do we fix this? How can we make this work better for everyone? And the CREATE partnership was born in 2003. Next slide, please. So what is the program? The program is 70 infrastructure projects, critical infrastructure projects that help improve efficiency, fluidity, safety, all the rest. And those projects are essentially highway and rail grade separations, separating passenger from freight rail, enhancing grade crossing safety, improving rail infrastructure and viaduct improvements, visibility improvements, operational improvements for not only the freight railroads, but also the passenger carriers. So those are essentially the buckets of projects. Next slide, please. This is a visual representation of those projects on a map. The red stars you'll see are completed. Green dots are in phase 3 construction. Purple squares are in final design, and then the blue diamonds are in phase 1 environmental. They're separated by 4 corridors: passenger, east-west, beltway, and the Western Avenue corridor. I'll key in on 2 of those briefly. The first being the Western Avenue corridor. So at the top of the purple line there on the north side of the map, you'll see the WA1 in a purple square. That's the Western Avenue 1 project, a project that Union Pacific is leading for the CREATE program, along with IDOT. Really what this is to replace 14 aging bridges on Union Pacific's Rockwell subdivision, from Fulton Street on the north to 16th Street, I believe, on the south. So we're replacing 100-year-old bridges that are at the end of their useful life, making viaduct improvements, lighting improvements for pedestrians and vehicles, sidewalk improvements, drainage improvements, track improvements, signal improvements. Right now, our trains go through that corridor pretty slowly, and which makes it a hotspot for cargo theft, unfortunately. But one of the goals with this project, in addition to replacing these bridges, is hopefully increasing train speed and hopefully alleviating some of that problem as well. And then the other, I guess one other thing I'll mention about WA1 is this project is wrapping up phase 2 environmental here very soon. And we hope to have a pre-bid meeting for prime contractors in the next few months. So if you're a contractor on the phone or something like that, I encourage you to stay tuned with the CREATE program for any opportunities, not only on the WA1 project, but other opportunities as well. And then the last thing I'll just key in on this slide, on the green dotted circle you see there in sort of the middle of the map, that's the 75th Street Corridor Improvement Project. It's a multi-segment project that's about $2 billion, I think, in total. And it's widely considered or called the greatest rail choke point in North America. You've got NS, CSX, Union Pacific, Metra, Amtrak, all running through here with various crossovers and all the rest, and became quite complicated. One of the projects that's happening now is the P3 project, which is led by CSX. They're creating a flyover over NS tracks just south of their 59th Street yard. And it's a tremendous project. I encourage you to go down and safely take a look at it if you ever get the opportunity to see what CSX and the team is doing down there. But essentially, we received a mega grant last year, about $300 million to continue that project. And so there are tremendous benefits, not only for the freight carriers, but also the passenger carriers and the residents of that area as well. So next slide, please. So what are the benefits of these projects? Really quickly, we're reducing passenger train delays. We're reducing motorist delays, truck delays by sitting at occupied crossings. We are reducing injuries and fatalities by creating these grade separations, so increasing safety. And then there's also a tremendous environmental benefit when you think about reducing terminal dwell and increasing the movement of trains. That's less time idling, not only for the freight trains and passenger trains, but also the vehicles on the road. There was, I guess, an old saying that it took just as long for a train to go from the Port of Los Angeles to Chicago as it took for the train to get through Chicago once it was there. And so we've reduced terminal dwell by a significant amount through this project or program. Next slide, please. So how does this get funded? This is about a $6 billion program, and we've had about $2.6 billion committed or spent to date on those 30, out of the 70 projects I should have mentioned earlier, about 35 of those are complete. So that $2.6 billion has funded those 35 projects. And then we figure we need about just over $3 billion left to complete the remaining 35. As you can see, the funding breakdown there, we have about $1 billion from the federal government, $750 million from the state, over $500 million from the railroads, and then local governments as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is really in addition to being a national model on delivering critical infrastructure projects and improving safety and efficiency of our rail network, this is really a national model from a community perspective too. As I mentioned, these projects don't just touch freight or passenger; they also touch community mobility and in creating benefits for community members as well. through local road improvements, sidewalk drainage, lighting, all those sorts of things that go on in these projects, reducing time at crossings, things like that. But there's also, from an education perspective, the partnership has donated a considerable amount of money to the Chicago Public Schools and the Chicago Public Library Foundation to create STEM programming, exposing children to the engineering work that happens, to the rail industry in general, and careers that are available to them. So using the project footprint within the project footprint to educate kids at nearby schools. So that's been fantastic. We also do a ton of local hiring within these projects, union outreach, DBE outreach, as well as setting up community advisory groups and public involvement working groups to not only tell the communities where we're doing these projects what we're doing and why we're doing it, but also to get their feedback and engage them as we go along. To see where, if we have a grant, what community improvements can we make within that? So it's been a tremendous partnership from that aspect as well. We're not just coming in and building a project. We're part of the community and showing that we're investing in the community. So next slide, please. And if you want any additional information on any of this, you can go to createprogram.org. They have all of the ongoing active projects, upcoming projects, how you can get involved, how you can sign up for the newsletter so you're receiving all the bid information, bid advertisements, and all those things. So I encourage you to do that. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom. I think it's very clear. Create is certainly a national model, a best practice of many sorts. So thank you for that overview as well. I just wanted to flag, we're going to hand things over to Kevin with Canadian National. I can't see the chat, so you may be doing this already, but after Kevin is through with his slides, we're going to do some Q&A. So if you can please start putting your questions in the chat, we can start getting a list together, and that'll be open to all three of the panelists after Kevin's through with his slides. So feel free to do that. Otherwise, take it away, Kevin.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Tom and Peter. It was informative and to be a tough act to follow. Your two informative slides. So Kevin Donahue, I'm with CN. I'm one of our U.S. government affairs managers. I cover Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan for Canadian National. Next slide, please. So at CN, we're a three-coast network. We have ports in Western Canada at Prince Rupert, in Vancouver, and then on the east side, we have ports in Montreal and Halifax. And then all the way down in the Gulf of Mexico, we have ports in New Orleans, Gulfport, Mississippi, and Mobile, Alabama, with Chicago being the convergence of all our routes. This kind of shows our unique Chicago advantage where we don't have to go through kind of the old spaghetti bowl of what Chicago is. And while we are a partner in Create, we kind of created our own Create program by purchasing the EJ&E in 2009, which gives us the ability to bypass the main traffic that goes into the city of Chicago. So a couple of our business units, forest products, we do a lot of that in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, grain fertilizers here in the Midwest, metals up in Minnesota from the Iron Range, petroleum down in Petroleum Alley, which is the area between New Orleans, Baton Rouge, coal here in Illinois and Indiana, and then intermodal, Illinois being our biggest spot, but we have intermodal in Michigan and Memphis. We do own our own trucking company, and then we also own our own fleet of Great Lake freighters, which operate mainly from the iron ore ranges in northern Minnesota, and they go along the Great Lakes to Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania to serve the steel industry. Next slide, please. We kind of covered some of this already with Peter. I think a big highlight, though, is that bottom right piece. 300 trucks are taken off the road with one freight train. It's obviously good for the environment. It's good for our roads, faster commutes when you're trying to go places. Next slide, please. Again, we kind of covered a lot of this too, but a couple important ones here at CN. We have our autonomous track inspection program, where if you see the boxcar behind our locomotive, it drives our network. It's taking million points of data of track inspection where it would take a crew days, weeks to get that information. Now we're able to do it in days. Another important one is the automated inspection portal. We only have a couple of them right now in the US, but similar to the track inspection, they're taking data points of all our locomotives, the boxcars, and they're all coming back to our facility here in Homewood where they're inspected. If there's an issue, they'll be taken out and repaired. Next slide, please. So here's our Illinois footprint. We are headquartered, or U.S. headquarters is here in Homewood, Illinois. We have a training campus also in Homewood, and then our largest mechanic shop is also here. We have about 1,600 railroaders employed. Our capital investment last year was only 234 million. We paid 46 million in local taxes, and then we gave 360,000 in community investment to the state. Our top three commodities, obviously intermodal, coal, and grain. We have two intermodal facilities, one in Joliet and one in Harvey, which is our biggest one. And then if we go to the next slide, we're building a third one. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. So yeah, this is about our intermodal franchise. 14, we directly serve 14 terminals, 22 inland terminals. And then we have a pretty good balance of domestic and international shipments. Next slide, please. And then this is the third intermodal facility we're building in the Chicagoland area. So this is located in Shanahan, Illinois. It's a far suburb, exurb of the Chicagoland area in Grundy County. CN owns 900 acres in Shanahan right now. We're building this in two phases. So the first phase will be the intermodal facility, which we're breaking ground on it later this summer. And then the second part will be all the logistic park, which is everything in the alphabet, the A, B, C, D, E, F, G buildings. Originally or initially it'll be about 250,000 lifts. At full build out, it'll be 1 million lifts. This is going to create 5,000 jobs in the area. It'll increase the warehouse space and logistics space in a growing area in Will and Grundy counties. Next slide, please. So again, we kind of covered a lot of this. This is just a color version map of the freight rail network here in the US, Canada, and Mexico. You could see CN is the red, CP is in pink, BN and UP are out west, and then NS and CSX are out east. Next slide, please. So just a couple quick bullet points of the economic contributions of the U.S. rail network. We're able to do high volumes, long distance freight transport. It's a capital intensive investment, which we've heard both from Peter and Tom. We're constantly investing private dollars into private infrastructure to move these goods, and it's sustainable leadership. As Peter went into all the efforts that the industry is putting into to make sure this is the cleanest, safest, fastest way to ship goods. Next slide, please. So just kind of on some railroad international trade. Quinn, if you could just keep clicking, there's some bullet points that'll just pop up. So this is international trade here. As you can see, so the railroads, we move about 32% miscellaneous shipments, which is your intermodals, anything that comes in a box. 31% it says others, but that's usually things for the auto industry. So it's finished autos, auto parts, steel, aluminum. 9% chemicals, 9% empty containers, 7% coal, 6% transportation equipment, and 6% farm products, which is grain, soybeans, anything that we're sending out to really Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. Here's just, I know this has been a hot topic with all the tariff news that's been going on between our friends in Canada and our friends in Mexico. The US and Canada by rail, we do about $104 billion in trade, $998 billion with US and Mexico. And between US, Mexico, and US, Canada, there's 30 total cross-border moves, 23 US, Canada, and 7 US, Mexico. Next slide, please. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was very informative. And I think we are doing very well on time. I will unscreen share now, but we think we have a couple questions so far. I'm getting caught up here. I did see one initial question for Tom about the situation with Metra. So, I guess background for anyone who may not be aware, Union Pacific has historically operated 3 of the Metra lines, the UP North, Northwest, and West lines out of Oakville Station. And that there has sort of been some discussions about that. I'm not familiar with it, but I think, Tom, the question was sort of what's the latest on that situation.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Ari. So, Union Pacific and Metra have partnered for more than 30 years since UP acquired the C&W to operate commuter service on the UP North, Northwest, and West lines. And that's something that's going to continue. We just recently, we're getting pretty close, I think, to finalizing the entire transfer of service from Union Pacific, which has historically operated the service, to Metra, really enabling them to run the service as they see fit. They'll still obviously run on Union Pacific-owned track. And that's something that we're working through right now. I'm not going to get into too much of that because it's before the STB and things like that. But essentially, Union Pacific is asking Metra to pay a fair market rate for access to those tracks, and that's where it's at now. And I would say there's really no reason to be concerned, Ari, for service or anything like that. Our CEO Jim Vena has told Metra CEO Jim Derwinski that service will continue, and there won't be any disruption as these business agreements are worked out. So thanks for the question.
Sure. So we have a question from Farid about Farid teaches a civil engineering class on rail transportation. They're interested on who they can reach out to for support, including potential internships. Is that something that any of the three of you, perhaps we can provide information offline, but is there any information that should be shared about that right now?
Well,
yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, if there's ever of interest, being a MUP grad myself, 93, I'm always willing and happy if it's of value to come back and, talk at classroom. We don't have internships per se. We have some management trainee / internships. They're all down in Fort Worth, though. I don't have anything local in the Chicago region.
Okay, thank you. One question that I had on my list, sort of to think about the network a little more globally, was sort of about the impacts of managing a gigantic network of infrastructure across numerous states, most of the country for some of you. So I was sort of curious how, if you have a major weather event or a storm, how does the railroad sort of adapt to those conditions? And how do you, if you have one incident in an isolated part of Utah or something, how do you, get the staff and resources out there to make that quick capital repair to keep, the railroad on track, literally?
It unfortunately, Quinn, is a more common occurrence than we would like to have weather-related disruptions. Weather-related disruptions can be, 2 days ago, there was a tornado warning in Iowa. We stopped the train on the tracks for safety, and tornado came through and still blew a few of the, these are double stack container cars, so it's just, perfect for the wind hitting it. And some of those container cars are pretty light, depending upon what's packed inside of them. It could literally be a container filled with pillows. So we had a large derailment on our main line, and a bunch of those cars got blown over in the wind. We immediately dispatch crews to repair the train, and then we have contracts with vendors throughout the nation who will get out there pretty quickly within a couple, 3 hours, and start removing the cars from the tracks or re-railing them if possible, if they're not too damaged. So we were up and running in less than 24 hours. I think we had eight double stack container cars that got blown over. But we're backing up and running, by the next day. So it is critical and imperative that we restore service as fast as possible. We have trains that are carrying thousands of containers, and we'll have multiple trains a day. You could just imagine the choke point or the backlog that would create on store shelves if we weren't able to get those through. We do unfortunately have weather events that are not as easy to repair. We've had flooding in western Iowa now, and I just say Iowa because that's my territory. Of course, there's these things happen across the country, but flooding in Iowa, in my 8 years, we had two severe flooding incidents where miles of track were literally washed away. And those repair efforts took us a couple weeks, a couple, 3 weeks to get those things back in place. But in those instances, again, We mobilize all the people that we need, and we carry out giant cars filled with rock and sand, and we rebuild that train line exactly where it was, and put brand new fresh track and ties on top of it. So it's a lot of that's why that's why we spend $4 billion a year. It's an expensive business to manage.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. I think Rochelle had a question sort of about community engagement, and I'm thinking this may be in relation to create projects, especially. And I guess for this could be for any of you three. Who would typically be your contact persons for community engagement when a project is ready to start? Is it sort of going to local officials, community organizations, maybe some of both? How do you sort of approach that?
Sure. So in the case of the 75th Street SIP, the CREATE program itself has a contact, a liaison through a vendor that we employ for the project. But there are also community engagement folks like myself and Peter at the individual railroads who will also be, liaisons in that case for specific issues. But the public involvement working groups and community advisory groups are run by the vendors that CREATE employs here to solicit that and community feedback and be responsive to community members. So those are set up on a project by project basis.
Thanks, Tom. Jared had a question about how can we work to minimize conflicts between freight and intercity passenger rail on the same right of way while also increasing passenger rail service. And I think one of you mentioned this in the presentation, sort of those improvements that are being made that help increase passenger rail performance as well. But I was wondering if any of you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So first, I would just say, well, based on the presentation I gave on CREATE, I think there are things that we're actively doing to eliminate or at least reduce freight and passenger train delay with passenger and freight grade separations, flyovers, things like that. Untangling the rail networks and so on. But the other thing I would just mention is that freight train interference is something that is a pretty small percentage of the overall delays that are experienced in the passenger rail network here in Chicago. If you can go on Metra's website and you can take a look at their on-time performance reporting, and if you dig into the numbers, the freight train interference is a pretty small number. We work very closely with Metra on the 3 UP lines. We dispatch those lines out of Omaha, and we're in constant communication with Metra to alleviate any concerns, triage issues, and things like that. Not to say that freight train delays don't occur; they certainly do. But one of the projects that we're excited about on the West Line is the creation of a third main line. That was about $100 million project that established that third main line between downtown and out to Geneva. And that also eliminates that freight train interference as well. I would also mention that, and I believe this is true for Peter as well in the BNSF, but Union Pacific has a curfew for freight trains during the morning and evening passenger rushes. And so that's something where we're stopping freight traffic so that passenger rail can move freely during those morning and evening rush times.
Hey, just to add to that too, and I guess on the intercity pieces is while it's a shared service, this is still 98% freight rail property that we have our mandate too. We have to move goods. We have to honor our commitments to our customers. So where it makes sense, obviously, when we want to work with Amtrak, we want to be a good partner with them. Sometimes Amtrak isn't the best partner with us too. I'm sure there's some Amtrak friends on this call, and they could say the same thing about us too. So I think there's a shared responsibility between the freight rail and passenger to be good partners and collaborative partners as we move forward.
Sure. Thank you. James had a question about the prospect for future federal funding for CREATE, given some of the changes in federal funding that we're seeing at the federal level.
Yeah, so I would just say, based on what we're seeing, in the first Trump administration, we saw continued federal support for the CREATE program. I think we're continuing to see that now. So I don't see any change from this standpoint. We've had federal funds obligated for various projects since President Trump took over in his second term here. So, it sounds like Secretary Duffy at the U.S. Department of Transportation is a supporter based on what we've heard. So, and our folks at IDOT and all of us at the Class 1 railroads have done, I think, a good job continuing to advocate for the CREATE program. So, long story short, I think we're hopeful and optimistic for future prospects here.
Thanks, Tom. Rodrigo, sorry about that. I see your question here. Rodrigo is asking if there are any major new rail yards in the suburbs of Chicago, or are there reasons to expand on the south side corridors? I'm not sure if I have the full context on that, but go ahead.
Well, Kevin mentioned his project in Shanahan. That's going to be a large one, so that obviously in the suburbs. BNSF is working on a rather large new rail yard that'll be outside of Wilmington as well. But there is still investment being done on inner city yards, if you will. We are on year 3 of 3.5 of a $330 million improvement in Cicero yard. So while that won't increase the footprint of the yard, it will create a lot more efficiencies and allow us to expand operations there. So that's in the city. That's not on the south side. I'm not on the south side. I'm on the west side. So
Thanks, Peter. Matt has a question about rails to trail or rails with trails developments. He understands the safety concerns of having a path next to active rail lines. There's certainly some challenges there. Any insights or experience that any of the three of you can share about coordinating trail projects that might be adjacent to your tracks?
Peter,
you want to take that one, or I can, or Kevin?
I mean, it's again, with my planning background on it, and we've seen very successful rails to trails projects where rail corridors have been decommissioned and that right of way which exists can be repurposed. I will say though that putting an active pedestrian or bike trail adjacent to an active rail corridor is generally not something that we like. As safe as we try to be, we always want to make sure that we minimize those conflict points. And so, I had a stretch in Iowa where we have a rail line that the community said, "Oh, that looks pretty empty. Can't we just, have 20 feet of your right of way and pave it and have a bike path?" And we reluctantly or unfortunately had to decline that opportunity, not only for the existing safety concerns, but I will also point out that rail has been around for 200 years, and when nobody really knew 30, 40 years ago about intermodal, so we were moving coal and grain and sand and such. So who knew that we were going to be developing all these intermodal yards? Who knew how we were going to be repurposing our existing rail lines? And as you see, we're investing billions of dollars a year to maintain those rail lines, not just for the business that we have today, but for the opportunities that will come tomorrow, which quite frankly, we don't even know what they are. And you can well imagine that once you provide a public asset like a bike trail or a hiking trail, and then you say, "Oh, sorry, we got to take that back because we need to put some double or triple track in there, or we need some space for a side yard," that's not going to go over too well.
Yeah, one thing I would just add to that is, in Chicagoland, we've got the UP North Line, and adjacent to that is the old, active still, but Green Bay Trail. And there's been some points where various communities have wanted to come to us about connecting that or getting the trail closer. And that corridor for us is already very narrow. Normally, we've got at least 25 or 50 feet of right of way on either side from the center of the main line. And in some of these cases, we've got less than that. And so for us to sell off any more right of way, it would probably be pretty unlikely in some of these cases. So it depends, I guess, to your question, depends on where it is and things like that. But safety is always going to be the chief concern. And if there are any safety issues, then, it'll be, I think, pretty tough for it to move forward. But our industry and public projects teams, all of our railroads have engineers who work on, reviewing proposals from local governments and from states that want to, create public infrastructure that impacts our railroad. And so, those are always a resource as well.
Thanks, Tom. All right, I think we have time for one or two more. Question from Dr. Sriraj. Are any of you aware of any data set that captures the location of rail yards across the country, either, I guess, for your railroad or in general?
Sure, AAR has a comprehensive list of all the rail yards. Do you need it in like a GIS file, Shirash?
Yep, Peter. We have downloaded something from BTS, but it doesn't seem to be very up to date, and there are some questions that we have about its completeness. And
Yeah,
and I think you can point us to. We'll be happy to kind of
I'll look into that for
pursue
you. I'll
that.
check if AAR's got something. I know obviously we got
Fantastic.
ours, but not for every railroad.
I'll send you an email following
Yep.
up. Fantastic.
All right, it looks like our last question will be from Craig. Do any of the three of you have anything to share about sharing track with high-speed rail and or electrification? I'm assuming that's more on the passenger side, but either way.
Yeah, so Union Pacific has Amtrak's Cardinal service going down from Chicago to St. Louis on our main line. So someone in our network planning organization equated it to me as essentially it's running a school bus and a Ferrari on the same line. And so how do you work that out? And so we made considerable investments along with IDOT to an Amtrak to allow us to operate both on that line from Chicago to St. Louis. And so that operates today. It's 110-mile-an-hour service. I know and Peter, maybe you can speak to this as well, and Kevin, but we have a Illinois High-Speed Rail Commission, which is essentially studying from the state's High-Speed Rail Commission, studying what a true 200 plus mile an hour high-speed rail service would look like. And I think based on the way freight operations are today, and if you really wanted to unlock some high-speed service, it would be, I think, very difficult to do it on shared track. Not that it couldn't be done, but that's sort of where it's at today. On an electrification, I can't really speak to that, I guess. Maybe Peter or Kevin could.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. I think that's about all the time we have for questions. Yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you so much to our three panelists for joining us and sharing these insights. I'll just remind everyone, Transport Chicago is a week from today. If you are registered or are not registered, all of our information is at transportchicago.com. The USC Urban Transportation Center does great work, and I know a series of other webinars. Anything to add there, Ed or Dr. Sriraj?
Well, we'll be planning the fall seminar series later this summer and share that information probably in August.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks everyone so much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you all
for tuning in. Appreciate it.